The youngest saint disciple in the history of the empire, Ichika, stood on the verge of promotion to a higher rank. Yet, just before ascending, he made a decision that altered his fate entirely. He chose to free a young girl from the nebulous sovereignty who had been imprisoned within the empire's dungeons. He did not merely help her escape, he gave her money to ensure her survival beyond the prison walls. With the war between the empire and the nebulous sovereignty raging for over a century, such an act was nothing short of high treason, a direct betrayal. Ichika was arrested. His elite disciple title was stripped from him. He was cast into prison. After a full year had passed, the authorities decided to release him, under conditions. They offered him a chance to atone for his crime, if he agreed to undertake a special mission, and if he succeeded, he would regain his freedom. The mission was simple in words: assassinate a witch of the sovereignty. But she was no ordinary witch. She was a descendant of a legendary sorceress known as Nebulous. In ancient times, that witch had turned the empire into a literal inferno, engulfing it in flames through overwhelming astral mana. Her bloodline descendants were called the Founders, beings who possessed immensely powerful astral spirits. The specific target this time was the younger sister of one of that lineage's witches, a figure feared across battlefields and known by a single title, the Ice Calamity. The moment Ichika learned the nature of his mission, his shackles were removed, his twin swords were returned to him. A special military transport vehicle was prepared, and he was informed that the Empire would provide any support necessary to guarantee the operation's success. Ichika took a slow breath. Then he made a request. He asked for 3 individuals to be assigned to his unit. Approval came instantly. He went first to Jin, instructing him to gather the remaining members. Jin moved immediately, heading to a girl named Nine, who was working at a restaurant. He informed her that Ichika had been released from prison, and that they would move toward the front lines at midnight. Afterward, Jin contacted the final member of the squad. Her name was Miss. That night, Jin arrived first to meet Ichika. Ichika thanked him for assembling the team so quickly despite the short notice. But Jin was accustomed to such urgency. After all, that had always been the nature of Ichika's missions. High-risk operations carried out under extreme pressure. Later, Nene arrived in the transport vehicle they would use for the mission. She congratulated Ichika on his release. Finally, Miss appeared, apologizing for her delay. She was 22 years old, the highest ranking among them, and officially the squad captain. As such, she bore responsibility for them all. A gentle smile formed on her face as she looked at the reunited team. This had been their unit before Ichika's imprisonment. And now, they stood together once more. A new mission, a new battlefield, a new beginning. Excitement filled the air. They departed toward the mission site. During the journey, they reviewed the details. Miss was visibly shocked upon learning that Ichika's target was the Ice Witch. Concern clouded her expression. She had heard that the witch once infiltrated deep into Imperial territory alone and returned unharmed. Rumors even claimed she was the strongest astral mage in history. Jin attempted to reassure her. The witch knew nothing about Ichika. Not even the nebulized sovereignty possessed data on him. He would be a completely unforeseen variable on the battlefield. Despite her unease, Ichika remained resolute. He would complete this mission. He allowed no possibility of failure to occupy his thoughts, because his true objective surpassed mere assassination. He intended to end the war itself. After some time, they approached the operation zone. There stood a massive reactor under construction, its defenses incomplete. The Imperial forces were stretched thin, preoccupied with repelling the sovereignty's relentless assaults. The cycle of war never ceased. The Empire constructed a reactor. The nebulous sovereignty launched an attack to sabotage it. The Empire developed stronger weapons, and thus the conflict continued. Ichika recalled his mentor's words. The true reason this war persists is not logic, but emotion. Reason alone would never resolve it. The only solution was the emergence of someone powerful enough. Someone who would wield overwhelming strength to force both sides to cease fighting, even if that person became hated by everyone. They arrived at the reactor perimeter and advanced toward their designated coordinates. Imperial troops stood on alert, but had yet to launch their assault, awaiting the signal to advance. Though they were within Imperial territory, sovereignty forces broke through the defenses and attacked their transport without warning. They leapt out at the last possible second. There was no time to think. A sudden fire-type spell surged toward Jin, but Ichika detected it instantly and deflected it with his blade, and that was only the beginning. A large group of sovereignty fighters emerged from beneath the ground. Despite the element of surprise, Ichika and Jin had anticipated an ambush of this scale. Ichika ordered Nine and the others to provide range support while he regained full combat momentum. This was his first true battle in a long time. They all readied themselves. Within seconds, they succeeded in scattering the sovereignty troops. Seizing the opening, Ichika dashed forward with lightning speed, overwhelming them in the blink of an eye with Jin's assistance. They believed the fight had ended. They were wrong. A colossal clay golem erupted from the earth. Standing atop it was the witch who had summoned it through her astral spellcraft. The massive construct charged at them with crushing force. Ichika cleaved through the golem with ease and directly countered the witch's assault. At that moment, Miss ordered Jin and Nini to reinforce the frontline defense forces. Ichika would handle the witch alone. Miss agreed, though hesitation lingered in her eyes, and so Ichika remained in the battlefield. Alone, facing the witch, she unleashed an overwhelming attack toward him. Despite the overwhelming force of the attack, Ichika overcame it with ease, cleaving through her spells with his twin swords as if slicing through mana itself. The witch narrowed her eyes sharply. "Are you a saint disciple?" He refused to answer. He had no intention of responding to any question, unless she first revealed the identity of the Ice Witch. Fury ignited within her gaze. With disdain, she declared that such knowledge would exist only in his dreams. Then she resumed her assault without hesitation, casting spell after spell in rapid succession. But the disparity in power was unmistakable. Before long, she found herself cornered, with no viable options remaining. She declared that she would rather die than be captured by the Empire. Attempting one final surprise attack to distract him, she lunged, only to be restrained effortlessly. And then, Ichika sensed it. An immense surge of astral spirit energy was approaching. The air around him froze instantly. Ice spread in every direction, encroaching even upon the reactor itself. In that moment, he understood. The witch he had truly been pursuing had finally appeared. The one he had fought earlier was merely her personal aide, Rin. Her role had been to draw him away from the reactor, buying time so the Ice Witch could freeze it entirely. The Ice Witch stared in visible surprise when she saw how easily Ichika had nullified Rin's power. "It's impossible for you to be merely a disciple," she said coldly. "You are, most likely, a saint." She demanded his surrender. Ichika refused without hesitation. She asked for his name. He answered. Then she introduced herself as well. "My name is Alice." In the very next instant, she invoked one of her grand spells. 1,000 ice blades surged toward him like a catastrophic blizzard. Ichika moved with extraordinary speed, deflecting the majority of them. Yet the relentless barrage began to wear him down. Left with no alternative, he awakened a hidden power within his swords. A counterforce erupted, mirroring her attack almost perfectly. The two energies collided in a shocking explosion of frozen mana and steel. Without pause, he charged directly toward her, but Alice activated a dense ice barrier, an absolute defensive spell that halted his advance. Once more, she told him to surrender. He answered clearly, "If not us, then who will stop this war?" Alice froze, not from magic, but from his words. For a brief moment, hesitation flickered in her eyes when she heard his desire to end the war. Then she declared that she herself would unite this world, through her own method. At that very moment, as she stood speaking, the massive ice slab beneath her cracked. Her footing slipped. The scarf concealing her face fell away. Ichika moved instantly. He caught her before she could fall. For the first time, he saw her true face. A strange silence enveloped them, but it did not last. Alice quickly regained her composure. She summoned her magical bird familiar and withdrew swiftly from the battlefield. From that day onward, Ichika could no longer sleep properly. Miss noticed the change in him. She sensed that his encounter with the Ice Witch was the cause. To help him clear his mind, she decided to grant him a short leave. She invited him to her home, served him coffee, and handed him a ticket to a theater performance she had purchased earlier. The play was being held in neutral territory between the Empire and the nebulous sovereignty. Ichika agreed to go. The next day, Miss personally drove him there. During the ride, he dozed off briefly and dreamed of his old mentor. He awoke in surprise. It had been a long time since his mentor had appeared in his dreams. He began to suspect that resuming the use of his swords had stirred something within him. He arrived at the theater. Inside, Princess Alice was seated among the audience, so deeply moved by the performance that tears streamed down her face, and by coincidence, Ichika was seated directly behind her. In the darkness, he extended his hand forward, offering his handkerchief. She accepted it. Neither of them clearly saw the other. When the performance ended, the lights came on. Alice turned to repay him for the handkerchief, and froze. It was him, and he too was stunned. She immediately suspected that he had followed her here and prepared to attack. But Rin quickly stopped her, reminding her that this was neutral territory. Any battle here would turn all neutral lands against them. Alice composed herself. With outward calm, she greeted him politely, then left. After exiting, she confirmed that he was not following her. Later, Alice and her companions decided to dine at a restaurant. Unfortunately, every table was reserved. The waiter suggested a shared table. They agreed, and for the second time that day, it was the very same table Ichika had reserved for himself. At first, they suspected it was a trap, but he clarified that it was merely coincidence. Neither side wished to leave, unwilling to appear intimidated. So they sat together. They ate at the same table. And even more strangely, Ichika's order was exactly identical to Alice's. No coordination, no prior discussion. Even the waitress assumed they already knew each other. They denied it immediately. When the food arrived, they discovered that their tastes were nearly identical. Unlike Rin, whose choice was completely different from both of them. Princess Alice returned to her palace, her thoughts consumed by everything that had happened. Rin was uneasy about her repeated encounters with Ichika lately, but Alice reassured her it was nothing more than coincidence. In fact, she pointed out that Rin herself had been the reason their distance narrowed when she disagreed with Ichika over the food and was forced to sit at the same table. Yet even though Ichika had tried to change his surroundings, the insomnia did not fade. And he was not the only one suffering. Even Alice could no longer sleep easily. Eventually, Ichika surrendered to sleep. In his dream, he saw himself as a small child, fighting savage monsters on a desolate battlefield. Suddenly, a girl wielding ice magic appeared, using frozen spells to aid him in combat. He awoke at dawn. He headed to training with his squad. There he met Risha, the advisor at the Human Defense Headquarters. She informed them that their team would be placed under her command for the upcoming mission. She also noticed the exhaustion in Ichika's eyes and brought up the topic of his insomnia. She offered him a ticket to an art exhibition being held in neutral territory. The artist was from the Empire. She had received the ticket as a gift and had little interest in art herself, but she knew Ichika admired paintings. Perhaps it would help clear his mind. On the other side, Alice was seated with her mother, the Queen. The Queen spoke of Ichika with clear suspicion. She sensed something unusual about him. With strength like his, he should have been one of the Empire's saints, a protector of its core. Then she added something even more unsettling. Since meeting him, the bond between Alice and the founder had begun to weaken. The founder was an ancient entity that had existed for over 100 years. After the death of Alice's elder sister, it had fallen into a deep slumber. The Empire had never known of that sister's existence, and therefore assumed the founder itself had perished. The Queen suggested that the weakening bond might be the result of a powerful astral force, perhaps connected to the sense of danger Alice felt. She asked if Alice had any explanation. Alice recalled the moment Ichika awakened a hidden power from within his swords, but she kept that knowledge to herself. The Queen decided to investigate further. She ordered Alice not to enter any battles until they uncovered the truth about Ichika. Alice grew weary of overthinking. Despite Rin's warnings, she chose to visit the same art exhibition Ichika would attend. She did not expect to see him there, but for the third time, they met by coincidence at the entrance gate. Alice froze. With sharp suspicion, she remarked that his frequent visits to neutral territory were becoming rather questionable. Ichika calmly explained that the artist was from the Empire. It was only natural for him to attend. If anything, he found her presence here more curious. She replied evenly, "Art knows no borders." He suggested they enter together. She avoided the proposal and took a different path inside the exhibition hall. After a short tour, she returned to the very spot where they had first encountered each other. He was there. He explained that he had wandered around and failed to find her. Thinking she might have gotten lost, he had returned to look for her. He persuaded her to enter together, reminding her once again, art had no boundaries, even if they were enemies. This time, she agreed. They entered the exhibition side by side, quietly observing the paintings. Alice lingered for a long time before a particular piece that had deeply captivated her. Afterward, she brought him a glass of juice, insisting that she considered herself indebted to him. They sat and began to talk. She asked his age. When he told her he was 16, she smiled softly and said she was only 1 year older than him. And suddenly, sleep overcame Ichika while he was speaking with her. Despite the fact that they were enemies, Alice called for a carriage to ensure he returned safely to the Empire. The following day, Ichika met with his squad to complete several assignments. A message arrived from Ryo, summoning him to the Imperial Council. He went at once. He sat before 8 high-ranking officials. They told him they were impressed by his ability to halt the witch, and that they were aware of his desire for peace. But then they delivered a harsh truth. He would never gather supporters for his goal. To the entire empire, he was still a criminal. For that reason, they decided to alter the conditions of his mission. They ordered him to capture the Ice Calamity Witch. After the meeting, Ichika returned home. Reflecting on everything that had occurred, and on his encounter with Alice, he made a sudden decision. The next day, he would go to neutral territory to meet her. He informed the command of his intention. They approved, but with one condition: Miss would accompany him. She told him that he had been visibly exhausted lately, and that she would not allow him to go alone. Ichika agreed. On the other side, Alice was thinking of him as well. Rin entered her chamber and presented new information about him. Ichika was the successor to the Crown Prince, the youngest ever to receive such a promotion, one of the Empire's most skilled swordsmen. Yet, he had been imprisoned after helping a girl from the sovereignty escape from an imperial prison. What Alice could not understand was, why had he done that? She ordered Rin to investigate further and to search for the girl he had helped escape. Soon after, the queen visited her. She spoke about the art exhibition and expressed her displeasure that the artist was from the Empire. She warned Alice not to become entangled with imperial soldiers. Then she left. But the queen's words had the opposite effect. They ignited something within Alice. She decided to meet Ichika herself, to hear directly from him why he had freed that witch. The next day, she went to neutral territory without prior arrangement. At the same time, Ichika set out with Miss as promised. Miss did not know his true destination, nor whom he intended to meet. She was surprised to learn he had not arranged a meeting at all. He was relying purely on coincidence. Even so, she chose to support him. As they approached the gates of neutral territory, Miss noticed a beautiful bird and admired it, unaware that it was Alice's familiar. Ichika, however, remembered that Alice possessed a similar magical bird. He asked Miss to stop the vehicle at the edge of the city. He continued on foot, expecting he might find her there. And indeed, they met before the gate. Miss felt tense upon seeing Alice. When she realized her true identity, she instinctively hid behind Ichika for a brief moment before regaining composure. The three of them moved away from the crowd to speak freely. Once they were out of sight, Alice called his name directly. She asked him why he had betrayed the Empire, why he had aided the sovereignty. He answered calmly. She had been a small girl, around 12 years old. Her magic power was weak, but the Empire had been determined to arrest her, forcibly gathering witches one after another. That was something he could not accept. Alice was surprised by his response. She said his words contradicted his actions. During their first encounter in the forest, he had pursued her relentlessly, determined to capture her. She had assumed his goal had changed after his imprisonment. He replied that his goal had never changed. He had pursued her then because he sought peace. If he could capture a powerful witch as a hostage, he could force the sovereignty into signing a peace treaty with the Empire in exchange for her release. Alice listened in silence. Then she said she believed him, but that plan of his would never succeed. Even if he were to take her hostage, the queen would never surrender, nor would she agree to a peace treaty. He did not understand the depth of the sovereignty's hatred toward the Empire. And yet, Alice was genuinely surprised that someone within the Empire truly wished to end the war. For that reason, she made him an unexpected offer. He could cooperate with her and place himself under her command. Rin objected immediately, insisting that Alice was acting rashly and that no one within the sovereignty would ever accept such an idea. But Alice silenced her and continued her proposal to Ichika, assuring him that she would personally guarantee his safety. Miss prepared to respond, but suddenly, the ground trembled violently. The sky shifted in color. Space itself lay open, and from within emerged the founder witch. Miss immediately assumed it was a trap and shouted that it was unfair. Only she and Ichika were present. But strangely, the founder attacked everyone, even Alice herself. At the same time, the queen sensed an immense surge of astral mana. She hurried to the founder's sanctuary, only to discover that it was no longer dormant. It had awakened. Joy overwhelmed her. She believed this power would allow them to destroy the Empire with ease. Back on the battlefield, Ichika and the others narrowly evaded the initial attack. The founder attempted to explain that she did not consider them enemies. She was attacking her own granddaughter because of a self-defense system linked to astral power. The The problem was, no one understood why that system had activated in such a way. Alice was frustrated. The founder's appearance had interrupted her conversation with Ichika. She attempted to calm the ancient entity, but the founder attacked her directly. Rin intervened at the last possible moment, blocking the strike, but she was injured and fell to the ground. Fear gripped Alice. Ichika reassured her and instructed her to use her ice magic to stabilize the situation. He ordered Miss to transport Rin to a hospital and evacuate civilians from the area. Then, Ichika remained alongside Alice to face the founder. He drew his twin swords, known as Corso. The moment the founder saw them, she realized they were the cause of her awakening. Ichika was startled and demanded to know how she recognized them, but she did not answer. She attacked immediately. Ichika countered her strikes, while Alice supported him with overwhelming ice magic. The founder grew furious that her granddaughter was fighting against her. Alice, however, was equally enraged. She had injured Rin. She was determined to return the founder to her slumber. The current era did not need her. Ichika and Alice united their powers, yet the founder's strength far surpassed theirs. Alice nearly faltered, but Ichika grasped her hand and refused to retreat. That single gesture restored her focus. She rose once more with greater resolve. She unleashed her astral energy to divert the founder's attention away from Ichika for several crucial seconds. Her plan succeeded, but she took a direct hit in return. Despite the devastating blow, she stood again. She created a frozen pathway leading Ichika straight toward the founder and activated a blooming ice barrier to shield him from incoming attacks. And finally, Ichika severed the founder's wings and returned her to slumber once more. After the battle, each of them returned to their respective homelands. The situation reverted to its former state. Mrs. Squad was now under Risha's supervision and had an upcoming mission. However, Risha granted them 2 weeks of leave beforehand. Although a vacation was welcome, Miss felt uneasy. Missions preceded by long periods of rest were often the most dangerous. 1 week passed. During the second week, Miss decided to take the team out for some entertainment. There was a grand prize in one of the games, a massive sum of money. She hoped to win it and purchase a new tank to protect them during withdrawals in high-risk operations. And once again, fate intervened. Alice went to the very same place. Not by her own will, Rin had persuaded her to change the atmosphere. She had no interest in the prize, she simply wished to play. Yet with remarkable luck, she won the grand prize on her very first attempt. Everyone was stunned. Nene approached to congratulate her. Since Alice no longer needed the remaining silver coins she had, she decided to give them to Nana, neither of them aware of the other's true identity. Meanwhile, Miss had spent all her money without understanding the game's mechanics and had won nothing. But fortune turned in her favor. Nene returned with the money she had received. As for Ichika, he felt something stir within his heart. He asked Nene about the girl who had helped her. She replied she did not know her. Nene described the girl to Ichika. She was extremely beautiful, blonde hair. She looked wealthy. Her features were almost like those of a princess. Ichika paused. Suspicion quietly slipped into his mind, but he chose not to overthink it. Meanwhile, after finishing the games, Alice walked through the streets with Rin. They passed by a fortune teller's shop. Out of curiosity, Alice decided to step inside and test her luck. She had been thinking about Ichika often in recent days and wanted to know more about him. The fortune teller told her, "Ichika is closer to you than you imagine." Alice hesitated. Some of the woman's words sounded accurate, yet they were vague. She offered a faint smile and left. And shortly after, Ichika appeared before that same shop. He entered. The fortune teller spoke to him the very same words. Elsewhere, Risha was attending a meeting with the 8 imperial officials. They were discussing a report of a possible vortex forming in the southwest of the Mayad Valley. Although forces were already stationed in the region, reinforcements were required. They decided to dispatch a special unit. The chosen squad was Mrs. Team. Risha was instructed to find a suitable justification to persuade them. She agreed, but demanded compensation in return. Another promotion in rank, as always. It was clear she was accustomed to such negotiations. Risha went to Miss and the rest of the team. She told them to forget the previous training schedule. They had an urgent mission. A new vortex might appear, potentially accompanied by a powerful witch. She emphasized that she was relying on them. After all, they were the ones who had previously stopped the Ice Calamity Witch. At the same time, Alice received a message from her sister Sizbel. They had detected a vortex in the south. The Empire had already deployed its forces there. They had not been informed earlier because the House of Zhu had delayed reporting the incident. Alice began to suspect that the Empire intended to exploit the vortex for its own advantage. She decided to investigate personally. She headed toward the Zhu family palace. Strangely, no one came to receive her, despite the fact that she was the queen's daughter. Alice advanced further into the estate. Suddenly, a masked young man appeared behind her, holding a dagger. She was visibly displeased by his rude behavior. He explained that he carried the dagger because his astral power was weak and he feared unexpected attacks. He asked her why she had come. She mentioned the vortex. He responded that what had occurred was merely a thermal and volcanic fluctuation, perhaps underground gas leakage. There was no definitive proof of an actual vortex. She asked him, then, why had the matter not been reported immediately? He answered that the head of the family had only just departed to submit the report. Preparing the documentation had taken considerable time. Alice was not reassured by his explanation, and just before she turned to leave, the masked young man said to Alice in a calm, cold tone, "It would be best for you to stay away from this alert." We shift to Miss and her squad, who had moved toward the gathering point of the units assigned to confront the vortex. There, Miss met her friend Shino and introduced her to Ichika and the rest of the team. Soon after, Nimes arrived, the commander of the participating forces. He was a saint disciple serving under the 8th-ranked saint. He wore an optical camouflage suit that partially obscured his features. He then began the briefing. He declared clearly that he would not be issuing special orders. Their primary mission, protect the vortex before the witches could intervene. And he added in a strict tone, if they failed to protect it, they were to destroy it immediately. He warned them not to question his methods, stating bluntly that his true objective was the eradication of astral power forces, and he would not allow anyone to interfere. Once the meeting ended, the units dispersed to locate the vortex, but they found nothing. Mrs. Team continued their sweep until they received a call from a girl named Noro. She informed them that communication had been lost with 2 units. Recon teams were contacted, but there was no clear evidence of direct intervention by astral forces. Miss decided to return to base to assess the situation. They were not the only ones. Most of the units had returned as well. Nimes convened another meeting. He informed them that only 3 squads were missing, and stated that it was not worth the risk of sending rescue teams. Their priority remained locating the vortex. Ichika objected sharply. More than 10 personnel were missing. He attempted to reason with Nimes, reminding him that they had once been fellow cadets, but Nimes refused to listen. He called Ichika a traitor and remarked that Ichika's rank was insufficient to address him. Miss stepped in as the squad leader and formally demanded that a rescue unit be dispatched, as Ichika had proposed. Nimes ignored her entirely. As night fell, Alice decided to head to the valley herself to investigate the vortex. At the same time, the masked young man was preparing his own plan. With him was a girl from his family named Kishin. Alice arrived at the valley. She immediately realized the vortex truly existed. The masked man appeared at that very moment. When she confronted him with the truth, he claimed they had only just discovered it and were about to report it. He introduced Kishin, explaining that she would handle the vortex personally, but Alice was unconvinced. She asked him directly, was he planning to exploit the vortex's power to ignite a full-scale war against the Empire? He was honest. He did not deny it. Elsewhere, Neni detected a surge of astral energy emanating from near the base, completely different from the vortex's signature. A message confirmed that the source was astral technology. Jin concluded that astral forces had infiltrated their ranks and were responsible for the missing units. They continued their search, and finally, they found the vortex, but they were not the first to arrive. At that very moment, a group led by Noro appeared. She announced that the Nebula's sovereignty had set a trap in the valley, and that the objective was to capture all Imperial Army forces. Suddenly, Noro drew her weapon and pointed it at Miss, threatening the team not to move. Then she revealed the sovereignty's mark upon her neck. Everyone froze. Miss attacked, and Noro laughed mockingly at their naivety. At that very moment, the voice of Commander Nimes echoed across the battlefield. No one could see him due to the optical camouflage suit he wore, but his attack was unmistakable. He charged at the sovereignty fighters accompanying Noro, striking them down one after another, all except her. It became clear that Nimes had known from the beginning that there was a traitor among them. He moved to eliminate Noro, but one of the wounded sovereignty fighters suddenly rose and launched a final desperate attack to restrain him. Noro seized the chaos, captured Miss, and escaped. Nimes attempted to pursue, but Ichika stopped him. At that same instant, Jin threw a tracking device onto the vehicle Noro used to flee. The reason was obvious. Miss would be taken prisoner. They needed her location to rescue her later. Yet Nemes insisted on continuing his primary objective, protect the vortex. Meanwhile, Noro headed to the masked young man, bringing Miss with her. The truth was revealed. This had been their plan from the beginning. They intended to capture an Imperial soldier and exploit the situation. Alice was there. She froze the moment she saw Miss. A sense of danger gripped her. No one knew about her meetings with Ichika in neutral territory. She feared Miss might expose it, and Miss nearly did, but Rin moved swiftly and struck her, rendering her unconscious. Alice scolded Noro for bringing an enemy soldier into their camp. Yet deep inside, she felt the weight of the strange coincidences tying her to Ichika. She steadied herself. Then she decided to act. She told Noro to leave the matter of the Imperial forces to her and to inform her only of their camp's location. The moment she learned it, she rushed toward it, eager to confront Ichika once more. On the other side, Jin noticed the footprints of Alice's golem. Nene confirmed they were in active pursuit. By their calculations, they had only 2 hours to rescue Miss before a missile would be launched at the vortex. But the shock was even greater. The missile had already been launched ahead of schedule. They realized a second launch would follow in approximately 20 minutes, this time with greater precision. There was no time left. They charged toward the witch's base. There, Noro attempted to exploit Miss, but Ichika arrived at the critical moment and stopped her. At that same instant, Kishin appeared and began her assault. Her power was overwhelming. Ichika felt tension rise within him. She was of pure lineage. He freed Miss from her restraints and ordered her to stay behind him. Suddenly, Nemes arrived under camouflage and attempted to strike Alice, but Rin sensed him and intercepted the attack at the last possible moment. Meanwhile, Kishin continued her assault on Ichika. He deflected her strikes with ease, but then she launched a missile similar to the one used at the base. The explosion roared toward him. Alice was engaged with Nemes. He blocked every one of her attacks, even the 1,000 Ice Blades spell. He exploited the opening in her assault, and had Rin not intervened, Alice would have suffered a fatal wound. She realized then, she had not been using her full power. She decided to become serious. In mere seconds, she froze the entire area around Nemes, immobilizing him before he could break free. She intended to return to her base, but a massive explosion erupted in the distance. It was Kishin's missile. Despite the tremendous blast, Ichika emerged unharmed without a visible wound, yet anger was evident in his eyes. The combat style of a child like Kishin had shaken him. He demanded to know who had taught her such methods. She ignored him. She attacked again with greater ferocity, but Ichika overpowered her and rendered her unconscious. As he attempted to seize her, the masked man appeared at the final moment and launched a lethal strike. Ichika reacted swiftly, narrowly avoiding death, but a deep wound tore across him. He froze briefly at the masked man's sudden appearance. "Who are you?" he demanded. The masked man refused to answer. He lifted Kishin, hurled Miss toward the vortex, and withdrew. Ichika cared for nothing except saving Miss. He leapt after her immediately, despite the danger of the vortex. At that exact moment, Alice arrived. She saw him throw himself toward certain peril, and without hesitation, she jumped after him. Ichika caught Miss mid-fall. Alice reached them and called his name. She told him she was willing to help, on one condition. When they escaped, he would fight her. He agreed. She grasped him. But suddenly, the astral energy within the vortex surged violently and split in two. They were separated. Each side was returned to its own base. Time passed. Rin noticed that since that incident, Alice had not stopped thinking about Ichika. She suggested they go find him, to conclude the battle they had promised each other. Alice was visibly excited. She agreed and decided to head to neutral territory. Meanwhile, Ichika and Miss returned to their headquarters in the Imperial City. Miss felt guilty toward her team and apologized for causing them trouble. But it did not end there. Since entering the vortex, she had begun to feel something strange in her arm, without understanding why. And at that very moment, Risha arrived. She informed them they had a new mission. The new mission Risha announced was an infiltration operation into the nebulous sovereignty. It was the very same classified assignment she had hinted at before. Then she revealed the true objective: capture the queen. Ichika froze. Jin stared at her in disbelief and said sarcastically that she should stop making such heavy jokes. Ichika agreed, initially assuming she was indeed joking, but Risha seemed genuinely puzzled by Ichika's immediate refusal. He was accustomed to irrational and near impossible orders, so why object now? Ichika answered plainly. Yes, I'm used to impossible missions, but this one goes beyond impossible. Risha affirmed she was completely serious. She insisted they would succeed because they were talented. Jin asked about the plan, especially considering that the witches possessed an astral power simulation system. Risha explained. The witches use something similar to a passport called a star crest. Anyone without this crest would immediately be identified as an imperial spy. Therefore, infiltrating the sovereignty would not be easy. But there was a method. She would explain it in 3 days, once preparations were complete. During those 3 days, Alice went daily to neutral territory, hoping to encounter Ichika by coincidence as before. But to her misfortune, he did not appear even once. Rin even began to suspect that the vortex might have swallowed him. Alice, however, was certain he was alive, and that he would come, as he had promised. She continued searching. Rin grew worried. Alice was the future queen. The internal family conflict was intensifying. Her siblings were increasing their efforts in preparation for the elections, gathering supporters wherever possible. It was unacceptable for her attention to be focused on an imperial soldier like Ichika. For that reason, Alice decided to duel imperial soldiers, perhaps to sever the thread of fate binding her to him. Meanwhile, Ichika's team was discussing Risha's mission. It seemed utterly illogical. Even residents of neutral territory struggled to enter the sovereignty. During the discussion, they noticed that Miss's arm was still hurting. At first, they assumed it was merely an insect bite. They decided to examine it and asked her to remove her jacket. The revelation was shocking. It was not a bite. The mark of the sovereignty had appeared on her arm. Tension rose instantly. Ichika tried to calm her while thinking rapidly. When had this happened? How? Jin suspected the vortex was responsible. He concluded that the only solution was to go to the research center for verification. Nene immediately refused. If it were discovered, Miss would be executed. Jin countered that the worst outcome would likely be imprisonment, and perhaps a reduced sentence. The argument intensified. Ichika then spoke directly to Miss. He told her the decision was hers alone. She had 2 options. First, surrender herself and they would attempt to mitigate the punishment. Second, conceal the mark and continue serving as their leader. Miss leaned toward the second option, but she was afraid. If anyone discovered the mark, the entire team would be in danger. They reassured her. They told her they would stand beside her no matter what. And so, she decided to hide the mark and continue her role as captain. Later, Ichika sat alone, thinking about Miss and her situation. She had fallen asleep, but anxiety would not allow him to rest. They needed a way to conceal the star crest. But the greater problem was this. They did not know how. Because discovering the truth about Miss would mean her immediate execution, the team decided to remain temporarily in the neutral city until they could find a solution. Ichika held firmly to his belief that they would find a way to stop the war, and that one day she would return safely to the empire, and they would stand together once more. The next day, Ichika went with Mies to the neutral city. They sat and spoke for a while. Then Mies went to buy drinks, leaving him alone. He remained seated, thinking about the impossible mission, kidnapping the queen. He understood that such an act would not end the war. It would only intensify it. Yet he did not know the alternative. At that moment, Alice arrived. She did not notice him at first. When she did, surprise crossed her face. She sat opposite him and asked what he was doing there. He told her he was thinking about a complicated problem. She tried to persuade him to confide in her, promising that whatever he said would remain between them. Just then, Rin arrived. She clearly disliked how close they were sitting. Still, she took out a bottle of juice and handed it to Ichika, saying it was from Alice. Alice was surprised, but Rin justified it by saying that within neutral territory, they were not enemies. Ichika hesitated at first, then he convinced himself that the strange taste was merely unfamiliarity. He drank it. Moments later, he felt dizzy and lost consciousness. Alice did not understand what had happened. Rin calmly admitted that she had placed a sedative in the drink. She said she had not expected him to actually drink it. She had assumed he would refuse, fearing the sovereignty might drug him, and thus distance himself from Alice. Then she added coldly, if she had known he would drink it, she would have used poison instead. Alice was furious, but she did not know how to respond. In the end, she decided to take him with her. At that exact moment, Miss returned. She was shocked by what she saw. Anger surged within her, releasing an immense wave of magic. But Alice stopped her effortlessly and departed swiftly. News of Ichika's kidnapping reached Risha, who immediately informed the emperor. Alice now faced another problem. She could not bring Ichika into the sovereignty's capital. If he awakened and escaped, the palace would be at risk. Therefore, she decided to transfer him to the nearest Nebulese province. Ryo convened a meeting with the 8 officials. They discussed Ichika's abduction. Some believed their original plan should continue unchanged, but the emperor ordered a temporary suspension. Ryo informed them that the kidnapping vehicle had headed toward Province 13 of the Nebulese sovereignty, formerly known as a special prison for political dissidents. There, a dangerous criminal named Salinger was imprisoned. Ryo believed that freeing him could benefit the empire, though convincing him to cooperate would be difficult. He was a native of the sovereignty. Still, she insisted on trying. Meanwhile, Miss stood with Jin and Nine, holding Ichika's twin swords, awaiting Ryo's orders. The instructions arrived. They would be able to rescue Ichika, but entering the sovereignty was difficult due to the astral simulation barrier at its borders. Ryo produced a special device. It branded their bodies with a magical seal that granted them temporary astral energy for 1 week, allowing them to appear as if they belonged to the sovereignty. She tested the seal first on Nine's hand. It worked. Jin immediately took advantage of the opportunity. He placed the seal over Mrs. Sovereignty mark to conceal it temporarily. Then he branded his own leg. Ryo explained the plan. They would infiltrate, create widespread chaos, and locate Ichika. At that moment, imperial forces would intervene, and if the opportunity arose, they would capture the queen as well. Meanwhile, Alice was on her way to a hotel in the prison province. And suddenly, Ichika awakened inside the vehicle. They had not expected him to regain consciousness so quickly. The following morning, Ichika awoke filled with anger. He believed Alice had deceived him, that everything had been orchestrated by her. Alice and Rin tried to explain, but suspicion remained in his eyes. They arrived at the hotel where they would be staying. Rin decided to remain in the same room as Ichika to monitor him. At the same time, Mrs. Team advanced. They successfully crossed the sovereignty's gates thanks to the astral seals. Ryo contacted them and requested to meet so they could proceed together toward Ichika's location. But she lied. She told them Ichika was in the prison. She did not mention that he was in a hotel. Meanwhile, Alice was influenced by Rin's plan. She saw an opportunity. Since Ichika was within their territory, he could be formally imprisoned. To make the accusation credible, Rin cut herself with a blade, intending to accuse Ichika of assault. She genuinely attacked him to make it appear real. Ichika was restrained, barely able to fend off her strikes. At that moment, Alice was unaware of what was happening. She entered the room abruptly to ask where they planned to dine, and froze. Rin was attempting to stab Ichika. Ichika was resisting with difficulty. He noticed Alice and called out to her, but Rin denied everything, until Alice stepped closer and physically stopped her. Alice realized Rin had gone too far. She decided to bind Rin with the same restraints that held Ichika, ensuring Ichika could not escape and Rin could not attack him again. She temporarily loosened his restraints and left him with Rin while she went to handle an urgent matter. Ichika seized the opportunity. "What are you planning to do with me?" he asked Rin. She answered coldly that she intended to imprison him, but the final decision belonged to Alice. When Alice returned, her astral crest manifested unintentionally. Ichika noticed. She asked him what he was thinking. Did he see her as a monster, as the Empire did? He told her about Miss and that he still respected her despite what had happened. He reaffirmed his determination to end the war. Elsewhere, Ryo led the team toward the prison under the pretense of rescuing Ichika, but her true objective was freeing Salinger. She reached him. He had been imprisoned for 30 years. He was surprised that Ryo had managed to reach him. She told him she would help him escape, in exchange for his assistance in invading the nebulous sovereignty. He remained silent for several moments. Then he agreed, out of sheer boredom. That night, Ichika stood by the window, observing the quiet city below. Alice remarked that this was merely its outward face. The prisons were filled with dangerous criminals. He asked if they possessed powerful astral abilities. She replied that not all of them did, but there was one in the Valley prison. She was referring to Salinger. She said he was known by the title, the Devil of Shattering Calamity, and that by law they were required to state his full epithet out of respect for the danger his name carried. She accused him of betraying the former queen and attempting to assassinate her. After speaking, she realized she had revealed too much. She asked Ichika not to tell Rin what she had said. At that exact moment, Rin appeared before them. Alice faltered, but Rin ignored it for now. She had more pressing news. Someone had infiltrated the sovereignty's borders without issue. Naturally, suspicion would have fallen upon Ichika, but his constant presence with Alice ruled that out. She added that a suspicious group had been detected in District 12. They might be associated with the Secret King's forces, so an alert had been issued without direct engagement. At the same time, Ryo was freeing Salinger. Miss, Jin, and Nini were waiting for her. Suddenly, the warning alarm sounded. Miss trembled, fearing they had been discovered, but Jin calmed her. If the alarm were for us, it would have sounded the moment we crossed the border. Emergency forces began mobilizing everywhere. Their equipment resembled that of the Imperial Army, designed specifically to counter astral-powered individuals within the prison. That confirmed it. The alert was not about them, and yet anxiety continued to gnaw at Mrs. Hart. Ryo might be in danger, and she wanted to help her, no matter the cost. Suddenly, the ground trembled violently, and a deafening roar echoed throughout the area. At that same moment, Ryo contacted the team. She informed them that the sound had come from the barrier leading to the lower levels of the prison. A massive crater had been blasted open with the assistance of astral power. Mrs. Hart shook. "What about Ichika?" she asked anxiously. Ryo reassured her. Ichika was most likely not in this prison. However, a colossal demon had entered a state of rampage, causing widespread destruction. She ordered them to retreat immediately and attempt escape from the guards. Though anger burned within Miss and the others, they focused on exiting the building without being captured, but the guards reached them, and in that same instant, another explosion erupted near the prison tower. Elsewhere, Rin received a report detailing the situation. Guards had heard a tremendous blast near Salinger's cell and were attempting to reach him, while emergency response units rushed toward the site. Alice immediately understood the gravity of the situation. If Salinger escaped, his astral spirit would spiral out of control. She decided to go herself. No one but her could confront him. She ordered Rin to prepare the vehicle. Rin did not object. Then Alice informed Ichika that she would be heading to the tower. He wanted to know the details, yet he assumed she would not tell him. After all, he was her enemy. But contrary to his expectation, she told him everything. She said she would feel more at ease if he knew the truth. Then she asked quietly, "If I asked for your help, would you help me?" And she left. Before hearing his answer, she changed into her combat attire. Before departing, she left a new handkerchief for him, replacing the one he had given her at the theater. She told him the choice was his. He could take it, or leave it. Meanwhile, Jin was attempting to escape with Miss and Nene, but guards surrounded them from every direction. Jin decided to act as the decoy. He told Nin and Miss to attack with full force once the guards were distracted. Nin refused, insisting she would be the decoy instead. Their argument escalated. In the end, Miss decided she would take the role. She was marked as a witch, and with sovereignty prisoners held within this facility, the deception would be believable. She stepped out before the guards. They assumed she was the witch responsible for the explosions and immediately charged toward her. They encircled her in the center of the courtyard. At that moment, Jin seized the opportunity and, together with Nini, attacked the guards from behind. As for Ichika, he remained alone in the hotel room, trying to comprehend the unfolding events. But the restraints on his wrists prevented him from moving. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was the same phone that had been brought with him into the room. He hesitated. Then he answered. It was Jin. Ichika was shocked to learn they were inside the prison, and that Alice was there as well. Jin cut the explanation short and told him to try reaching them. That was precisely what Ichika had wanted to do. But there was a problem. The restraints. Then, he remembered the handkerchief. It was not merely cloth. He searched it quickly and found a key hidden within. He understood. Alice had given him the choice, to help her or not. He unlocked the restraints immediately. Then he informed Jin that he was heading toward the tower. Alice arrived at the prison. She witnessed the scale of the destruction. She told Rin this was no longer just Salinger's escape. It was widespread unrest threatening the entire sovereignty. She decided to end everything herself. She began by extinguishing the raging fire within the tower, using her ice magic to encase the flames and suffocate the inferno. Alice ordered Rin to try stopping Salinger. She was the only one Alice could rely on in this confrontation. Meanwhile, Ichika reached the perimeter of the tower, where he reunited with Jin, Nini, and Miss. They wanted to withdraw immediately, but he retrieved his twin swords from them and asked for only 15 minutes. Then he rushed toward the battlefield. Rin arrived before Salinger. He looked at her mockingly. "You're just a servant. You can't do anything against me." But a moment later, he realized she was no ordinary attendant. Curiosity flickered in his eyes. He wanted to know her true identity. She refused to answer and said coldly, "Because you are a traitor." He smiled in disdain. "I am no traitor," he replied. "I am a king. I sought to gather the astral stars. Once I reclaim them all, I will become the strongest king in existence." She did not listen. She attacked without hesitation. He stopped her assault effortlessly. Even when she summoned her golem, he destroyed it without effort. He even turned her own attack against her and told her that her power could not compare to his. She realized then, he had stolen that power from the royal family. Anger surged within her. He sneered, saying the royal family did not deserve such power because they never refined it. Then he used his energy to temporarily strip her of her astral ability and cast her to the ground. Yet even so, she stared at him with unwavering defiance. He decided to finish her with a final strike. But at the critical moment, Ichika arrived and nullified the attack entirely. Ichika turned to Rin. "Make me a simple deal," he said. "If I defeat Salinger, you let me and my companions leave the sovereignty safely." Rin had no other choice. She agreed. Salinger did not understand. Why would someone from the Empire help him? He decided to test it. He unleashed a massive attack. This time, Ichika blocked it. And more than that, he split the magical assault apart. Calmly, he said, "That attack of yours won't work anymore." Salinger realized Ichika was tracking him through the scattered flames around them. Impressed by his sharp perception, he asked how he could possibly do that. Ichika answered simply, "I wasn't born with this power." Salinger respected the reply, though he could not tell whether it was talent or coincidence. He decided to discover the truth himself. He charged forward. Rin sensed danger and shouted, "He's an astral mage. He can seize astral power." But before she could finish, Salinger struck swiftly. He did not want to reveal his true ability before Ichika. He was enjoying the duel. Another sudden attack, but Ichika's instinct saved him. He evaded the strike and immediately countercharged, intending to end the battle before another surprise could come. However, he collided with an invisible magical barrier surrounding Salinger. The latter laughed. "All your chances to defeat me are gone. Your swords will never reach me again." But Ichika did not retreat. He lunged once more. Salinger tried to stop him, and failed. Ichika closed the distance. Salinger attempted to evade. Then suddenly, the ground beneath Ichika exploded. Volcanic magma surged upward from the depths. Rin warned him just before the attack fully activated. Ichika leapt away from the ground at the last possible instant, narrowly avoiding the eruption of magma. Rin was forced to assist him. Without Ichika, they would not be able to stop Salinger, especially since she still did not know all of his tricks. Salinger laughed mockingly. "You haven't seen my true power yet," he said. "What I've used so far is only a fraction. My strength runs far deeper than you imagine. If I were to unleash it completely, you would die instantly." At the same time, Alice continued extinguishing the fire, commanding the emergency forces to search for Salinger. Suddenly, Nimes appeared behind her and attacked. He told her they would never defeat him as long as Salinger remained outside the prison. Then, he vanished once more. Back on the battlefield, it became clear that Salinger's power was not limited to a water spirit. He could fuse two opposing elements into a single attack, fire and ice or any contradictory pair, doubling the destructive force. He unleashed a technique known as Frozen Inferno. Ichika attempted to sever it, as he had done with previous spells, but this time, the flames intensified instead of fading. Ichika was struck. Rin initially believed Salinger had gathered astral stars to reach this level, but he corrected her. "What you see now is merely a side effect," he said. His true goal was to fuse astral stars with human beings. He claimed only 2 individuals had ever reached that level, and the Nebulous founder had been one of them. When Rin heard that, her resolve to defeat him ignited. Salinger attempted to warn her after what had happened to Ichika, but she responded that Ichika had defeated the founder before, and that Salinger stood at roughly the same level. He did not believe her. She continued speaking, deliberately prolonging the exchange to buy time, and suddenly, Ichika reappeared. He lunged at Salinger, who barely avoided the strike at the last moment. Salinger was stunned. He had assumed Ichika was dead. He quickly realized that prolonging this battle would make escape impossible. The black blade severed astral arts, while the white blade reflected attacks. As for how Ichika survived the previous assault, he had allowed the ice to freeze him momentarily, shielding himself from the fire. Then he shattered the ice from within using both swords. This time, Salinger unleashed a massive sandstorm. Rin stepped in once more to support Ichika. Salinger decided to eliminate her first, but at the decisive instant, Alice arrived. She halted the attack and cleared the path for Ichika to advance again. The battle reached equilibrium. Salinger admired Ichika's capability. At last, he had found an opponent worthy of his attention, yet he declared confidently that no one would defeat him. Then, without warning, he threw himself from the top of the building, laughing madly as he disappeared into the darkness. Alice took charge of restoring order. She ensured the prisoners were returned to their cells and that stability was re-established. Ichika concluded the confrontation and approached Rin and Alice to confirm their agreement. Then he withdrew with his team before they could be apprehended. Alice assumed the remaining Imperial soldiers had retreated as well. But the truth was more dangerous. Later, Risha met with Neems. She was wearing the same camouflage suit. They had used it to infiltrate the sovereignty. 2 additional units had successfully reached the central district. They had even sighted the palace. Risha returned and reported to the emperor. It became clear that the true objective was not merely capturing the queen, but seizing a rare lineage within the sovereignty. On their way back to the empire, Ichika asked his team how they had entered the sovereignty in the first place. They explained the astral seals. Miss admitted she had temporarily become a witch through the seal, and that its effect would last only 1 week. She did not know what she would do once the duration expired. She asked him to help her when they returned. Meanwhile, Alice returned to the palace with Rin. They discussed Ichika's assistance. Rin acknowledged his strength, yet she could not accept his position. He was still their enemy, but they were not alone. Someone had been listening. Sizbul, Alice's sister, the very girl Ichika had once saved. She had overheard their conversation. She wondered about the person who had captured Alice's attention. Despite being an imperial warrior, she remembered the one who had saved her. His name, Ichika. Doubt began to grow in her heart. Could it be the same person? She wished to meet him again. Meanwhile, Risha reported the developments to the emperor. It turned out the emperor was nearly the same age as Ichika, and he was interested in him. Because a princess of the pure lineage had taken an interest in him, he saw in that an opportunity to exploit. The following morning, Sizbul awoke from a troubling dream. She had seen her mother, the queen, in danger, and herself unable to save her. She rose in alarm and decided to check on her immediately. But upon arriving, she discovered the queen had guests, so she quietly withdrew. A short while later, the queen summoned her personally. She instructed Sizbul to travel to the state of Samira, a neutral nation. Reports indicated that Samira was strengthening its ties with the empire. The queen wanted Sizbul to verify the situation herself, using her astral power. During their conversation, news arrived that Princess Elatir had returned to the palace. In the empire, the authorities questioned Ichika to ensure his condition. They asked whether he had been tortured inside the sovereignty. He denied everything. He returned to his team, but they too were required to undergo inspection to confirm that the astral seals had vanished from their bodies. Miss was anxious. She did not know how to deal with her mark. As they were discussing it, a girl from the medical coordination team named Mikal arrived with Risha. At first, Risha spoke indirectly about their situation, and they failed to grasp her meaning. Then she clarified. Military law limited continuous frontline combat to 30 days, extendable to 45 at most. They had exceeded that by far. If they continued, it would result in disaster for them and others. Therefore, she granted them 60 days of leave, and forbade them entirely from engaging in combat during that period. She left without allowing discussion. There was at least one advantage. They now had time to address Mrs. Astral Crest problem. Ichika suggested distancing themselves temporarily from military facilities to remain safe. Nini proposed traveling somewhere far from the empire, a quiet resort. Within the sovereignty, Alice was attempting to finish the mounting work before her. The files were endless, the pressure immense. After hours, exhaustion overtook her, and she decided to take a break. She heard welcoming voices echoing through the palace halls, announcing the return of an important figure. She assumed it was Elatir, who had been gathering supporters for herself. Rin informed her that Elatir's campaign had been successful and suggested she go greet her. Alice agreed, but in the corridor, she ran into Sizbul. She invited her to walk together, but Sizbul ignored her and left without response. Alice assumed it was stress from the elections. She wanted to step outside briefly to relieve the tension, but Rin refused. The sovereignty's strongest warriors were currently stationed at defense points, preparing for a potential invasion by the empire. The queen was also considering redistributing authority, and Sizbul would soon depart for the independent eastern nation. Alice had no choice but to remain in the palace. Meanwhile, Elatir met with the masked young man from the House of Zhu after her arrival. She told him that someone close to them was involved with the Empire. He asked whether she had proof. She replied that it had not yet reached the level of treason, but she did not want it to continue. When he asked for the person's identity, she did not answer. At the same time, Ichika and his team decided to spend their leave in Samira. It had once dreamed of rivaling the Empire, but now it was merely a peaceful resort state. Miss attempted to enjoy herself, but Ichika's mind remained focused on one thing: how to remove the astral crest. Still, on the first day, they resolved to make Miss happy. By the end of the day, Miss and Jin returned to the hotel due to exhaustion. Nene went with Ichika to buy food, then left him alone briefly. And then, he collided with Sisbel by chance. Ichika froze. He recognized her. Moments later, she recognized him as well. But she withdrew before they could speak. The instant she saw him, she disappeared into the crowd. She could not believe she had encountered him here. She returned to Schwartz and excitedly told him she had met the knight of her dreams, the person she had been searching for. She decided to meet him that night. Meanwhile, Alice was overwhelmed by work. Rin informed her she must rise early the next day to attend a formal ceremony attended by important figures. Alice sighed wearily. Before she could protest, the queen entered and asked her to accompany her. She led her to Sisbel's chamber. Using the key Rin possessed, the queen confessed her concern about Sisbel. She had been staying in her room all day, as if hiding something. The queen wished to uncover the reason, and Alice agreed to help. Alice and Rin entered Sisbel's chamber and found a newspaper lying open. It contained an old article about Ichika, recounting the incident in which he helped a persecuted girl escape. Alice froze. She had no idea how Sisbel had learned about him. That night, Sisbel returned to the place where she had encountered Ichika earlier. She activated her unique astral ability, one that allowed her to observe the past as though watching a living recording. She traced his movements and identified the hotel where he was staying. She headed there immediately. The moment she entered the room, Ichika seized her wrist, assuming she was an intruder, or worse. In the darkness, he had not seen her face, but once the light revealed her features, he recognized her as the girl he had collided with that morning. He asked sharply, "What are you doing here?" She startled him with an unexpected request. She asked him to come with her to the sovereignty. Back at the palace, Alice felt uneasy. Perhaps Sisbel had witnessed her meeting with Ichika in neutral territory using her astral sight. Rin attempted to reassure her, explaining that Sisbel's vision range did not exceed 300 meters, but Alice was unconvinced. Perhaps she had overheard her conversation with Rin inside the castle. Perhaps she now suspected a connection between her and the Empire. Meanwhile, Sisbel told Ichika she had come to repay him for saving her, and to restore the position he had lost. She asked him to accompany her to the sovereignty. She lied, claiming she was merely a servant within the royal palace. Ichika questioned her. "Why me? Alice has countless followers there." She answered simply, "I trust no one." Then she left, saying they would meet again. Ichika remained standing, conflicted. Rin proposed a solution to Alice. They would persuade the queen to travel to Samira under the pretext of checking on Sisbel. That way, Alice could speak with her directly and determine whether she was hiding something. The queen agreed. In the Empire, news reached the 8 officials that Sisbel was alone in Samira. They decided to kidnap her. Samira was their ally, and the opportunity was ideal. Meanwhile, Elatier met once more with the masked young man. She revealed that the individual involved with the Empire might be one of her own siblings. Despite the gravity of the accusation, she believed the future of the sovereignty outweighed the elections. She asked him to investigate again. Throughout the day, Ichika's mind remained unsettled. His team noticed his distraction. He barely responded to their conversations. After prolonged thought, he decided to change hotels. He did not feel secure after Sisbel's visit. He did not want to endanger his friends. Miss objected, but he convinced her by claiming the new hotel was cheaper. As they walked, Nene noticed that the adhesive covering Mrs. Astral Crest was beginning to peel. They realized they needed a real solution. Jin suggested visiting the general market the next day. The store sold goods from both the sovereignty and the empire. Perhaps they could find the same concealment solution their former captain had once used to hide a crest. They agreed. They arrived at the new hotel. Ichika claimed he would exchange currency before heading to the store, but in truth, he left to search for Sisbel, and he found her. Despite the concealment spell she had cast, he pinpointed her location. He led her to a secluded place so they could speak. He asked how she had known about the new hotel, and how she had arrived even before he did. She answered honestly. Her astral ability allowed her to see the past. She had observed his phone call earlier that morning when he booked the room and learned the details. Though revealing such information was dangerous, she wanted to prove her sincerity. Then she told him the truth. She was not a servant, she was a royal heir. Ichika was stunned. He could not understand why the queen's daughter would need him. She told him someone was attempting to frame the queen, using the founder. That individual did not care about the sovereignty. They wanted its destruction. If the queen were to die, a full-scale war would erupt, a war against the empire. Both sides would collapse. The problem was, she did not know who was responsible, and therefore, she could trust no one. For that reason, Sizbel asked for Ichika's help. She told him he was the only one capable of preventing a full-scale war that would destroy both sides. She assured him that helping her would not mean betraying the empire. And at that very moment, Alice arrived at the hotel where Sizbel was staying. She encountered her guard, Schwartz, who was shocked to see her. He explained that Sizbel had disappeared after saying she was going to settle an important matter. He asked Alice to help search for her. Elsewhere, Ichika was still speaking with Sizbel. Though he did not wish for war to erupt, he refused her request. His goal was not merely to prevent the next battle, but to end a century-long conflict and forge a genuine peace treaty. Sizbel told him that such a dream was impossible. Her people would never trust the empire. Even so, he stood firm. He added that there was someone within the sovereignty who shared his objective. Sizbel was startled. Who? She asked. But before he could answer, the masked young man appeared. He was accompanied by a special unit of sovereignty forces. He looked at Sizbel coldly and said he had suspected her betrayal. She tried to explain that she was acting to save the sovereignty, but he began recording her words, ensuring she would appear treacherous regardless of what she said. He declared that the House of Zhu cared only about controlling the elections, and that he would not allow anyone to threaten that. He moved to apprehend her. She fled. The soldiers pursued. Ichika intervened to stop them. But suddenly, a colossal armored soldier appeared before Sizbel, blocking her path. Ichika froze for an instant. He did not understand where the armored giant had come from, nor why it was here. He rushed forward to save her. The masked man obstructed him, attempting to seize Sizbel himself before launching a direct attack at Ichika. At the decisive moment, Jin and the rest of the team arrived. The area descended into chaos. Special forces, the armored giant, the masked man, Sizbel trapped, and amid it all, Ichika stood at the center of the battlefield. A complicated position. Suddenly, right before Sizbel, the air itself tore apart as if reality had been split open, and from that rift emerged a terrifying entity, the witch hunter dragon deployed by the Empire. It wasn't a living creature, but a mechanical soldier, a specialized mecha engineered to track down astral energy and annihilate it without mercy. The moment Ichika laid eyes on it, he understood everything instantly. This was an Imperial weapon. But why was it here? Without hesitation, he dashed forward, determined to stop it, only for Mask to suddenly block his path, wearing a cold smile that concealed deadly intent. In the next instant, he and his soldiers launched a coordinated assault, executing precise combat techniques. Yet Ichika evaded them with astonishing agility, as if he could read their movements before they even began. Ichika shouted, trying to halt the fight. Sizbel is not a traitor, but Mask didn't care. To the sovereignty, merely speaking with an enemy was a crime severe enough to erase her future entirely, even stripping her from the very race for the throne. Then suddenly, Sky Team arrived. Miss, the moment she saw Mask, froze in place before shouting, "That's him! He's the one who threw me into the vortex!" At that same moment, the Witch Hunter unit activated its system. Astral energy analysis initiated. It began scanning everyone present, until it stopped. Target locked. The highest astral output was coming from Sizbel. In an instant, she became the primary target. Mask ordered his soldiers to capture her, but the machine made no distinction between ally and enemy. Anything standing in its way was an obstacle to be eliminated. In a shocking turn, the mecha eliminated the soldiers themselves, then stood directly before Sizbel, beginning to charge a devastating energy attack. Mask simply smiled coldly. Even if she died, he would still be the victor. But, with a sudden strike, Jin appeared and attacked Mask directly. Caught off guard, Mask asked, "Why are you trying to save an enemy?" Jin replied with lethal calm, "I don't care, but you threw Mismus into the vortex. And that's enough reason for me to take you down." The battle erupted. Mask's soldiers engaged Jin and Mismus, while at the same time, the mecha fired its attack toward Sizbel. But at the critical moment, Ichika appeared, cutting through the attack with his blade and releasing a sharp energy wave that dispersed the strike. At that moment, Nini arrived carrying her weapon. She asked Ichika to buy her some time to prepare it. Ichika surged forward again, unleashing a relentless chain of attacks, combining his combat skills with his energy-enhanced sword. But not a single strike had any effect. The mecha didn't even move. Attempting once more, the machine lunged toward Sizbel, but Ichika reached her first and pulled her to safety. She looked at him in shock and asked, "Why are you helping me when you refused before?" He answered calmly, "Mask isn't someone I can trust. I won't leave you to him, and I won't let you get hurt." At that moment, Nini announced that the weapon was ready. She fired. A direct hit struck the mecha. On the other side, Jin and Mizmis managed to break away from the soldiers, but Mask pursued them, striking Jin and injuring his hand. "With that, you won't be using your sniper anymore." Jin smirked coldly. "I don't need it." He struck him with his other hand. Mask survived thanks to a recording device he carried, but in exchange, the data containing evidence against Sizbel was destroyed. Mask grew furious, throwing barrels of gasoline across the area and ordering them to be ignited. But nothing happened. He quickly realized the reason was Mizmis. Her new power generated wind currents that prevented ignition. He understood immediately. This power, she gained it after the vortex. And that made her interesting. He began approaching her, but Jin fired at him, knocking off his mask. Mask stopped, then smiled. "I enjoyed this encounter, but this isn't the end." Then he vanished. At that moment, everyone thought the battle was over, but the mecha rose again. It shed its outer armor and began charging a luminous astral energy attack. Shock spread across the battlefield. "Why won't it stop?" From behind, Neni shouted, "That's light astral energy." Ichika froze. That meant inside the mecha, there was an astral spirit. As the attack was unleashed, he shouted, "Take cover!" He grabbed Sizbel and narrowly evaded the blast. Nene attempted another attack, but this time, the mecha activated a defensive barrier and blocked it. Ichika ordered her to retreat and assist the others. She asked, "What about you?" He answered firmly, "I'll stop it, no matter what." The mecha began preparing another attack, but Sizbel intervened, releasing magical smoke that disrupted its detection. In that instant, Ichika seized the opportunity and delivered a powerful strike that slammed it to the ground. Finally, it fell, but suddenly, a surge of energy erupted from it, and a massive astral spirit burst out, grabbing Sizbel and transforming into a terrifying entity. Ichika attacked it, but to no effect. And in that very moment, Alice appeared. She unleashed a devastating ice attack. The two exchanged glances. "What are you doing here? You too?" There was no time to argue. Alice restrained the entity with ice, creating an opening for Ichika. He charged forward, but the entity broke free. "What is that?" "An astral spirit." Another shock. Why would the Empire possess something like this? Then suddenly, the spirit prepared another attack. Ichika shouted, "The shield!" Alice activated her ice barrier, blocking the attack effortlessly. But the entity didn't stop. It began destroying everything around it. Alice sighed softly. "I wanted to fight you as a rival, but not now. We have to work together." Ichika agreed. In that instant, their powers synchronized. Alice formed a massive sphere of ice, using her ultimate technique, while Ichika focused all his energy into his blade. The attack was unleashed. They clashed with the spirit's power, and managed to halt it, striking it directly. And in the end, the astral spirit collapsed. It fell and vanished, and Sizbel was finally freed. At the same time, deep within the Imperial corridors, shocking news spread. The witch hunter weapon had been completely destroyed, something far beyond all projections. A heavy silence filled the halls before they immediately began reassessing the situation and drafting a new strategic response to this unexpected turn. After everything that happened, Ichika and Alice stood facing each other for a brief moment, exchanging silent glances filled with unspoken meaning. They thanked one another quietly, while a faint blush appeared on Alice's face as she admitted in a low voice that she had no desire to fight him. At that moment, Sizbel regained consciousness and looked straight at Alice, asking clearly, "Do you know Ichika, and what exactly is your relationship with him?" Alice tried to avoid the question, claiming she didn't know him at all, but Sizbel wasn't convinced. With calm certainty, she pointed out the obvious. Alice was lying. Alice quickly turned toward Ichika, urging him to confirm her words and deny any connection between them. But Sizbel suddenly interrupted, her tone unexpectedly calm as she said she didn't mind, then openly declared that Ichika was her ideal knight. Alice froze in place, completely caught off guard, and questioned what she was even saying, but Sisbel responded coldly that it wasn't her concern. In that instant, a voice cut through the air. His comrades were calling out to him. Ichika turned immediately and left, heading toward them, while Sisbel watched him and declared with quiet determination that she wouldn't let him go so easily. Soon after, Ichika returned to his team, who welcomed him with visible relief, clearly overjoyed to see him safe after everything that had happened. Elsewhere, Risha and Nameless appeared, having already received news about Ichika cooperating with a witch and the destruction of the weapon. Nameless asked about the Emperor, and Risha replied that he had been absent for quite some time, likely staying somewhere far from sight. Then the scene shifted entirely. Salinger walked alone, muttering that he had grown tired of this world, yet his interest in Ichika continued to grow. Suddenly he sensed a powerful and unfamiliar presence, forcing him to stop. Before him stood the Emperor himself. Salinger looked at him in surprise, admitting he hadn't expected to meet him here, but the Emperor calmly replied that there was something important he needed to discuss. In another place, Mask appeared, speaking with one of his relatives, stating that it was finally time to prepare for the Queen's selection. Inside the palace, Elatir entered the Queen's chamber after being directly summoned. The Queen began asking strange and unexpected questions, whether she had leaked information about Sisbel, and even whether she was truly the real Elatir. And in that moment, Elatir smiled. Finally, in a place hidden from all eyes, Ichika and Alice met once again in secret. Alice looked at him and remarked that their encounters always happened in such strange ways, while Ichika calmly replied that he didn't mind. Then she told him seriously that if he ever encountered anyone from the sovereignty, even her own sister Sisbel, he must act as if he didn't know her at all. Ichika agreed without hesitation. They spent a short time together in a quiet moment filled with a strange balance between rivalry and closeness, and then they parted ways, each of them returning to their own world. And here our tale reaches its end, dear viewer. We hope you enjoyed it and found it thrilling. Before you close the video, don't forget to press the like button to support us, subscribe for more stories, and activate notifications so you won't miss any new anime recaps. Share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time.